Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. It's Tuesday, and we open up two big cities. First of all, it's Cleveland right now. After this one, it'll be Philadelphia. But Cleveland's front and center. It's the American Sports History Podcast, hosted by my good brother, Peter Ray. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing this, 347-205-9631. It goes by quick, so catch the archive version on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports, podcast platforms powered by Mancini Media. So without further ado, it's more of him, less of me. Let me lay the red carpet down, put the podium in its place, and hand off the mic. Peter, first of all, how are you? Second of all, how can people get a hold of you? Third of all, I've been chasing down this guest for quite a while. He's a hot commodity. I'll let you introduce him, too.
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well, very well. I have a YouTube channel. It's my name, Peter J. Ray, REA, history videos, including Cleveland baseball. And you're absolutely right about tonight's guest. He started the Voice of the Fans podcast. He's from Seattle, Washington, lives in Los Angeles, California, and he's a writer for the Los Angeles News-Observer and a multimedia journalist. So he is a rising star as a sports writer. Welcome to the show, Mr. Cameron Buford.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. Thank you, Peter, for that introduction there.
Yeah, I'm now. First of all, Cameron, could you tell us about your career as a sports writer and multimedia journalist?
Oh, wow. Surely, sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks you and Mark for inviting me on the show first and foremost. But my journey is kind of odd, man. I have a sales background, so I've been out here in Los Angeles and enjoying the sun and the fun, and I've been selling a lot of products, anything to customer to provide solutions for customers. So that was that's been my journey for most of my time out here. And I decided then with the Chargers coming to town, the Rams coming to town, I wanted to do something within sports, and what better chance than then, a few years ago, to take my hand at it and give it the best shot I had. And my end was start writing articles. So I opened up a website, What's Good in Sports. Check it out for me. What's Good in Sports is the website. And my idea, Peter, was to talk to athletes, the abundance of athletes that are out here, and how they're giving back to the community, how they're ingratiating themselves within the community, not only here in Los Angeles, but anywhere around the world. I talk to visiting players when they come to town. We had locker room access, and I would ask these questions like, what are you doing in your community? How are you giving back to your community, and what are you doing? Because I thought for a long time that athletes in general get a bad rap. The only time you hear about them is when they're doing something wrong, they're going to court, they got arrested, car accident, drinking and driving, whatever, what have you. But I thought a lot of their good deeds, a lot of the things they were doing off the camera, away from the camera, I should say, in their communities, giving back, school drives, Thanksgiving turkey drives, a lot of this stuff goes underreported, and not a lot of people know about it. I'll give you one example. Hunter Henry, who just left Los Angeles Chargers, and he got signed by the New England Patriots. I asked Hunter this very question, like, what do you do within your community? How do you give back to your community? Do you do anything to give back to your community was a question I asked him. And he's like, absolutely. Back in my hometown of Arkansas, we have a human trafficking issue. So I wanted to start a foundation that focuses on human trafficking. Little girls are being taken from not only from this country, but they're brought over here from other countries, and then there's trafficking going on, and they're being forced to do prostitution and what have you. And then that sets them down a whole life of, they never rebound from that. And so he wanted to focus and try to protect these little girls from being human trafficked. And my jaw dropped in the locker room. I couldn't believe that. Here is this guy, 2 years out of college, has an NFL career, is ahead of him, millions of dollars in the bank, and then that was his focus. It blew me away. But that told me that there was a story here. Another example was Andrew Whitworth, offensive lineman who left Cincinnati for the Bengals and came over here to the Rams, right tackle. On his, I think it was 36th birthday, what he did, his wife asked him what he wanted to do for his birthday. He says, I got it all planned out. We're going to a school in an underprivileged area, South in Watts, actually, and he bought 136 bikes for the kids at the school. The kids the Rams didn't put this together. The school didn't ask him to do this. The kids were unknowing of this. He shows up. He went and spent his own money at the Walmart or Kmart, I think it was, and bought 136 bikes, took them to the school, and then at lunchtime he gave these bikes out to the kids. I thought that was tremendous. I thought that was a fascinating story. So my website, What's Good in Sports, wanted to deal directly with that, but then I have to do some legwork to get those stories, if you will. So right now I cover the Los Angeles Chargers, I cover the Los Angeles Clippers, and then that enables me to get access to the players, and we can talk about these different things. So that's a journey I took. I changed careers kind of mid swing, just because I had this passion on my heart and in my head, and I just wanted to give it a try. So I felt while I had an opportunity to do it, I'll go ahead and make this happen. So that's what I do. Once I opened my website, I began selling my articles to the local publication, and then that's how I struck a deal with the Los Angeles News Observer. So I began writing stories for them. Every week, OG NSC is the website. OG NSC is the website. And it's the Los Angeles News Observer. So I write a lot of stories for them. I just finished up the Los Angeles Chargers draft recap, and I look forward to meet with some of these young players and see what they have a passion on doing. Excuse me. Can't control that there. I want to see what they have a passion and what they look to do in the future. So that's the kind of long-winded, I know, but that's the kind of how I got my start in sports writer. Also, I have a Voice of the Fans podcast that I do every week. It's on iHeartRadio, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Radio, Apple Radio. Voice of the Fans podcast. We do it every week, and it started off with just an NFL show, but it's over the last 3 years it morphed into all of sports podcasts. So we talk NFL, NBA, some Major League Baseball, some boxing, but Voice of the Fans podcast. And then I have a Voice of the Fans YouTube page. You check out the Voice of the Fans YouTube page. I have hundreds, well, thousands, actually, of videos where I'm interviewing prominent stars. Jim Brown is one of my prominent interviews there. Sugar Ray Leonard interviewed Eric Dickerson on there. Coaches, players, a lot of coaches and players are on there. To Voice of the Fans on YouTube. Check it out. Please subscribe, rate and review the podcast. Also, please subscribe, rate and review the YouTube channel. Let me know. Watch a video, leave a comment. Let me know that you checked it out. Let me know what you think, or let me know. Give me some feedback. All feedback is good feedback, Peter. So I'll take anything you got to say, man. So that's what I do. Those are my media forms that I'm doing. So multimedia journalist. That's what I'm working towards and trying to build this brand.
Well, that's wonderful. Really, really something. You brought up human trafficking here. I'm a sports fan, but at the end of ultimately, sports is entertainment. It's not really. It really isn't significant, although it is to fans, really. But when you get into you brought up human trafficking, which is, I think, the biggest problem in the world, from what I've heard. That it's not many people know human slavery, and it's such a depressing, horrible. A lot of people don't even want to hear about it. So if you're shining some light on that, that's just tremendous, Cameron.
I tell you what, man, when I asked them, I was interested in, again, that's my platform. I'm interested in kind of what you're doing within your community. But when Hunter Henry told me that, I'm in the middle of the locker room, my jaw dropped. And I couldn't believe I'm looking at, and I'm thinking at 23 years old, kind of what was I doing at 23? Was I focused? I don't think I was worried about anybody else, much less trying to focus on improving tragic events that's happening and really impacting people's lives so drastically. So it was real kudos to him. He and we talked a lot when we had media access in the locker room, obviously before COVID. I thought he was a really good guy, but I like to talk and share those stories just because, once again, I just think far too often what athletes do in the community or off the field, it gets overlooked, and we don't really, light's not shined on them until something wrong happens. And I just think as a former athlete, I think that's not doing them justice.
I love what you've brought up, this what's good in sports. I've been a long sports fan. I'm a historian into the history of sports, and the thing maybe that I dislike the most in sports is the negativity in journalists, which goes way, way back. And really, and you think, Mike, this is just horrible, especially coming from on a hometown here in Cleveland. Mostly I've noticed in Cleveland, sports writers going way, way back, where they're just very critical of the players, and you think it's just so harmful, and I hate it. And when a lot of the fans, you see that all this negativity among fans. They're very hard on the guys. These guys are under a lot of pressure. Yeah, they're rich and famous, but they're also, there's so much pressure on them from the fans, and then when the fans are hard on this negative attitude. So I think this is wonderful. Here you're breaking into this field, and this is exactly what sports needs, is positivity from journalists, because they have so much power. They have so much power to influence public opinion. And so if you can and that's so important, because we're all affected by the attitudes of others. And so sports journalists, since people are into sports, this is wonderful that you are doing this, bringing a positive attitude into sports journalism.
Well, thank you for pointing that out.
So that's wonderful. Now you interviewed Jim Brown. He's the big star in Cleveland football history. What do you remember from that interview with Jim? Probably the greatest running back of all time.
Yeah, arguably one of the best. I've actually got a chance to meet Jim a couple different times, which was I didn't set out to do this just to meet famous athletes, but Jim, obviously, when Jim is in your presence, you got to talk to him. So I met him right before when they drafted Baker Mayfield. When they drafted Baker Mayfield, he was excited about Baker Mayfield. So this was a couple years ago when I initially met him. And then he was ready to talk Cleveland Browns. I mean, he knew everything about them. He knew the team. He knew the coaches, and he was still following them pretty heavily. So I had to ask him some questions. He's a Brown, and he played for him 50 years ago almost, but he's still a Cleveland Brown at heart. And I asked him about the Browns, and he said, "Well, if Baker produces, there'll be something." And sure enough, we see a couple of years later when Baker produces, and they get their coaching, their coaching lined up. He's actually producing. So I could see that he was a fan, and so he was excited that they actually had a quarterback. And that's when I asked him about Baker, and he was like, "Hey, if he produces, this would be a good time, a good team." And sure enough, they are, who they are, and they're only getting better. I think Cleveland Browns fans have a lot to be excited about this season moving forward. I mean, they got a great running game, they got quality receivers, they got a good offensive line, they got a better defense. So I say this is a time for Cleveland Brown fans to actually be excited and can walk around with their chest puffed out a little bit.
Yeah, it's nice since we've been through a long, very tough years. Cameron, you've been a Miami Dolphins fan since 1981. I became a sports fan in 1972, and I remember the Miami Dolphins. That was their undefeated season. And this Bob Greasy, I thought Larry Zonka was such a cool guy, and Jim Kick, Paul Warfield, and Browns gave the Dolphins a tough game, but they won that. They won the 72-73 Super Bowls. but nothing since. You want to talk about your experiences as a Miami Dolphins sports fan, and what do those two teams mean to you, the back at 72-73 Dolphins?
Oh, well, I mean, the Miami Dolphins are the only team to go undefeated in football. And so we have the argument every day. And, in fact, way over here on the West Coast, I pop a bottle of champagne every time a team loses their undefeated record. So the Pittsburgh Steelers went, I think they went there 11-0 last season, and so it was week 12 before I got to have a glass of champagne with some friends of mine. But ultimately, we got to have that glass because of Miami Dolphins' record still intact. I actually became a Dolphin fan, as you say, in 81, so I'm aware of the record. I'm aware of that history. I just wasn't around to enjoy that. But the Miami Dolphins is, as you stated, I've been a fan since 81, since they played in that Super Bowl with Fulton Walker and the Killer Bees against the Washington Redskins, I believe it was. And once they signed Dan Marino, I grew up in Seattle. I saw Dan Marino play at Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, and I didn't understand at that time, like the way he was throwing the ball. I didn't understand when draft came around why he was falling in the draft. Now, politics and bad publicity and reporters giving bad stories around. I didn't understand that quite at the time, but nonetheless, he dropped, and Don Shula said, "That's my guy. I want to draft him." So I was extremely excited when they drafted him. I thought we were going to go to the 19 straight Super Bowls when they got Dan Marino, because I thought he was that good, especially when they went to, he said, at that record-breaking season in 1983 it was. They went to the Super Bowl in the 84 season, or the 85 season. They were the only team, that Chicago Bears team. Now, I'll talk to any Bears fan. The 85 Bears, widely known as the best defense ever to play in the NFL, correct? I mean, you could say the Steel Curtain, you could say the defense with the Giants, but the Bears were widely recognized as the greatest defense ever in football. Dan Marino, Miami Dolphins ate them up, chewed them up. That game, that Monday Night Football game, I don't know if you quite remember it like I do, but ate them guys up. It was a blowout from quarter one. As soon as Marino, because Buddy Ryan was just not going to drop back and play his own defense. They were going to play man-to-man, and the receivers that the Dolphins had, give Marino any little time, he's going to hit him in stride, and that's what happened. They were just big play after big play after big play, and Buddy Ryan, not adjusting his defense, allowed the game just to get way out of hand. So I would talk to any Bear fan to say, hey, those Miami Dolphins team, they should have won the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they went on and lost to Steve Grogan, Andre Tippett in the AFC Championship, and they went on to get crushed by those same Chicago Bears, 46-10, one of the biggest blowouts in the Super Bowl history. It's just, one of those what ifs. What if Miami beats New England, goes on to play in the Super Bowl against the Chicago Bears, and they finally get their Super Bowl win. That would have been their first one since 1972. However, it didn't happen. And again, I'm still young. I'm thinking, okay, that's okay. We'll go back soon enough. Well, they went back and they lost to the 49ers, and they haven't been close again. Marino had a great career, but just never got us to a Super Bowl. And part of that, I think, it was kind of Shula relying too much on the defense. They never gave Dan Marino a running game. Relying too much on the offense, never gave Dan Marino a running game. But I still think Dan Marino is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game.
Well, the Bears only lost one game in '85. Was that against Miami?
Yeah, they got waxed. That was it.
Okay, so that's interesting. Football. You brought that up. The stuff that you're not aware. I wasn't really aware of. So that is interesting. How that would have been a good Super Bowl if they had gotten there. So now you mentioned the other day how you cried when Julius Irving retired. I think one of the coolest players of all time was Dr. J. I remember in the 70s in the ABA that was really cool. And so, can you talk about Julius Irving and what he meant to you?
Well, I mean, every kid playing basketball in the neighborhood I grew up in. Back then, I'm a 70s kid, so every kid wanted to have an afro. Every kid wanted to be able to glide through the air like Julius, the Dr. Irving, as they used to say in Philadelphia. So I remember as a youngster going to watch a fish that saved Pittsburgh, and he was a star on the basketball team. It was about a basketball team trying to revive a city. And he was a star on the basketball team. So that was my early. I heard of Dr. J, but the first time I really paid attention to who he was in the movies. And so that I saw the movies, and then he started playing for the Philadelphia 76ers, and I became a fan of him, shortly thereafter. And it was so exciting to see him win a championship. Growing up in Seattle, I was not a fan of the big city teams, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. For whatever reason, I grew an affinity for those Philadelphia 76ers. They were trying to beat Boston. They were trying to beat Boston, who had, how many Hall of Famers did they have? Every player on the team went to the Hall of Fame, I think, in the early 80s. Everybody from Larry Bird to Kevin McHale to Robert Parrish, Danny Ainge on the team, Sixteens. I think I'm being facetious, but a lot of their players went to the Hall of Fame. But at the time, they ran the East, the Boston Celtics, the Los Angeles Lakers, and during those early 80s, in mid 80s. They ran the West, so I was not a fan of either one of those. And I'm a fan of the underdog. So Philadelphia was trying to break through, and when they finally broke through and won that championship, it was a sign to me that anybody can actually win a championship. All you do is work hard and keep at it. That stick-to-itiveness. If you show that, continue to work hard and continue to take your bite at the apple, pretty soon you're going to break through. And that's what they did. Obviously, it took them picking up Moses Malone, but they were finally able to get that done. So I was a big fan of Julius, Dr. Irving, and yes, when he retired, and I want to say it was 86, 87. If forgive me if I get off if I'm off by a year or two, but that was sports-wise, that was probably the last time I actually shed a tear, watching him walk off the court for the final time, because he was an icon. Like I say, just growing up in the schoolyards, growing up on a blacktop, everybody wanted to be like the Doctor at the time. Everybody wanted to have the afro. Everybody wanted to glide through the air and dunk like he did. So I was a huge fan of his, just on a blacktop. Everybody was, everybody I grew up with. So that was a sad moment. Now again, at a young age, 12, 13, you don't realize just kind of the cyclical things of life, how life happens, how he got old. He couldn't do what he used to be able to do before, so it just happens that way. You don't understand everything quite to the nth that you do now. So it was a sad moment. We always said we'll never see anybody like him again. Well, little did we know Michael Jordan was going to be joining the league a year later, right? And then when Michael Jordan goes out, there'll be nobody else like him. Well, Kobe comes out and he's not exactly like him. He was the closest to him. So it was that mentality, the reason I was sad when he did retire.
One of the nice things as a fan, when you find out people from another city are supporting your team, and you don't expect it. Maybe you're not aware of it. But we were talking the other day about the late '80s Cleveland Browns, which was in my life, the best Cleveland Browns teams. Three AFC title games in 4 years, and they lost all three, but still they were a very strong team. And you want to talk about the late '80s Cleveland Browns?
Oh my goodness! Do you want to talk about it? That's what I always wonder from Cleveland Browns fans. Like, do they want to talk about that?
Oh yeah, I do. Sure.
Just as a fan, just as a sports fan, I mean, man, I was not growing up in Seattle. Denver Broncos at the time were part of the AFC. Seattle was an AFC West team, and Denver and the Raiders was one of the teams that they always rivaled with Seattle. Seattle put up a good fight, but somehow Denver will win and the Raiders will win, the same thing. So I was not a Denver Broncos fan. So, but the Cleveland Browns, man, they just had that grit, they had that moxie, they had that toughness. Again, the underdog that I find myself rooting for. So I was rooting for them through each. I wish I was at the dog pound. I would have been right there with the dog bone in my mouth as well, and the dog mask on my face as well, because I really wanted them to win and not only beat the Broncos, but get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl, because they were an underdog team. You know, it wasn't the glamour city, it wasn't the big city teams. It was the underdog. The Cleveland Browns were that close to winning the title in my lifetime. And so from Bernie Kosar to, Brian Brennan to Webster Slaughter, Kevin Mack, Ernest Biner. I played running back in high school, so they had has it been done? I mean, really have to do some homework, but I'm not sure it's been done. If it has been done, it hasn't been done many times. Since since Ernest Biner and Kevin Mack both ran for 1,000 yards in one season. I don't think that's been, as I say that, I'm not sure that has been done since they did it, in that 86 season, 86, 87 season?
85, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay. That was a tremendous effort. Just, again, as a running back, I like both of them. There were two. One was a fullback, one was a tailback. They're getting it done. I liked the quarterback, Dixon, Hanford Dixon, Frank Minifield. I mean, I was a big fan of those teams right there. I thought they played great football, and just to get the drive one year. Oh my goodness! I thought they had them beat. I thought they had they punted the ball, pinned the Broncos down in the end zone. So when Mark Jackson ultimately catches that pass and they complete that drive, the 92-yard drive, oh my goodness! It was how can they rebound for that? But the next season, they came right back, and if my memory serves me correct, they went 14-2, and they're going in for the win. And then Ernest Biner fumbles. It's like, oh my goodness, how can this happen? How can lightning strike twice to one team, one city, back-to-back years at home? You had a better record the second year. You were at home. You had the first round. You had the first round bye, so you had the home field advantage. And you know, it wasn't John Elway this time. It was your own guy kind of fumbled the ball going in, and he was running with so much force and velocity trying to get in the end zone. He didn't even recognize that he fumbled the ball until he landed in the end zone and didn't have the ball. And, oh, man, that was just oh, my goodness. I don't believe you really wanted to talk about that, because I don't really want to talk about when the Patriots beat the Dolphins back in that 84 run to the Super Bowl. I only talk about it because you asked, but man, I can only imagine how you guys really felt.
Well, it's a passage of time. Yeah, I mean, you go through life, and Ernest Biner wrote a book called Everybody Fumbles, which is true. Life has success and failure, and you could see in this recent video that was called about Cleveland, you could see he still felt sad about not. It's still because he was the one who did fumble. So, but anyway, it's awful nice that you care about that, even though you're not from Cleveland. The time has run. We're out of time. Boy, it's just time flies. Our guest has been Los Angeles News Observer writer and sports writer, multimedia journalist Cameron Buford. He's got Voice of the Fans podcast. Do you have any final words for our listeners, Mr. Cameron Buford?
Hey, well, thanks for having me, Peter. I just want to say that to you and Mark first and foremost. Thanks for having me. Please check out my work. Voice of the Fans YouTube page. Voice of the Fans on YouTube. Type it in. You'll see me there. We have hundreds of videos and hundreds of interviews with me interviewing athletes, prominent stars, prominent people in the industry. And I just talk about sports, man. And again, visit the website, What's Good in Sports. You'll see a lot of articles. And with the pandemic, I was able to, because of the relationships I built, I was able to talk about how athletes were actually paying the salaries of the arena workers. I mean, that was a good thing that they were doing, because once the arena shut down, these workers had nowhere to go. They went right to unemployment. Well, athletes were giving back to them. The Brooklyn Nets, the Sacramento Kings, the Philadelphia 76ers, just to name a few of the athletes, teams that were really doing stuff for the community. So I love that. I love that stuff. If you have any of these articles or any of these stories that you want to see shared, you want to tell me about, please, info@what'sgoodinsports.com. That's info@what'sgoodinsports.com. Please shoot me that article, shoot me that information, because I love to research and love to write stories about it, love to share these stories. I just believe they go far too often, they go untold or unheard. So thank you once again, Peter. Thank you, Mark, for setting this up. Again, Cameron Buford here, Voice of the Fans YouTube page. You can find me on Twitter, What's Good in Sport on Twitter, What's Good, the letter N, Sport singular on Twitter, and Voice of Fans on Instagram. Thank you guys for having me.
Our guest has been Mr. Cameron Buford, a rising star in sports journalism. It's really inspiring and really wonderful to have you on the show, and I'm sure you have a very bright future, Cameron.
Thank you, Peter.
Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Mr. Mark Buford.